The man hit the asphalt with a wet, hollow sound while Maya bent to retrieve a soggy napkin. She saw the blood spreading across denim and the two suited figures move with practiced, efficient cruelty. Fear tightened her throat. She kept her hand on the napkin because letting go felt like admitting she had seen too much. Within seconds, the shadowed doorway had a third figure framed in it, tall, steady, not hurried. That was the moment the problem became concrete. She had witnessed a crime, and someone powerful had noticed that she had seen it. Maya turned her head and forced herself to count details. The light above the diner flickered. The rain hit the hood of her coat in precise, loud taps. She remembered the route home for her brother, the exact time the overnight bus arrived, the way Jamie slept with one shoe on. Those practical facts pushed through fear like a stack of small, urgent instructions. Fear made her think of Jamie first. Fear made every choice from that point outward. A man with a silver signet ring stepped from the doorway and scanned the wet lot with a slow, disciplined look. He did not move like the others. He moved like someone who chose when to strike and when to stop. Marco and Rosa, staff from the diner, had already frozen at the door. Rosa's fingers found the brass knob and did not turn it. Marco's mouth worked without making a sound. The tall man watched Maya, then inclined his head once and walked toward the heap on the pavement. Rosa spoke first inside the diner. "Maya, get back." Now her voice was thin and high with urgency. Maya obeyed instantly and kept her knees bent near the door. "Marco, call the police." "Rosa, call them now." Marco fumbled for his phone with hands that would not stop trembling. Outside, the two suited men began to lift the body. They worked without wasted movement, folding the man's limbs as if they had practiced the motion. The tall man touched the fallen man's shoulder once, then looked up toward the diner window, as if checking for witnesses. His eyes found Maya and lingered. He did not reveal anger. He did not reveal contempt. He revealed calculation. Maya's pulse thudded in a way she could feel under her collarbone. She swallowed hard and stepped closer to the counter. "Jamie will wake if I am late," she whispered, though the words were not for Rosa. The thought of her brother waiting at a cheap apartment, with a bowl of cereal cooling on the counter, made her hands go numb with motion. She imagined his hair sticking up, his breath even in sleep, and the fear recalibrated into a set of choices. Stay and risk telling too much. Run and leave what she had seen to become evidence in someone else's hands. Marco's phone rang and the screen showed an unknown number. He put the phone to his ear, fumbled with the speaker icon, and then made the call. Maya watched him speak in clipped phrases she could not hear clearly. The suited men finished folding the body into a dark car. They moved like men closing a business matter. The tall man walked back to the diner entrance and stood framed by warm light leaking from inside. His coat hung heavy. His shoes made no unnecessary sound. He kept his hands in gloves. He watched Maya as if he were reading a list. Then he stepped into the doorway, who saw the man. Marco's voice was flat when he spoke aloud, though his eyes were asking everyone for a name. Rosa's knuckles were white on the counter. Maya could not force her voice, so she made a sound more like a small intake than a reply. The tall man, Luca Moretti, she thought she heard Marco mutter, closed his eyes for a breath. He opened them and looked at her. "Luca, tell me what you saw." His voice was low and even. It did not rush her. It did not scream. It in a way that held the power to make a lie feel fragile. Maya blinked and let facts push out. A man, two men in suits, a gun. They dragged him to a black car by the curb. Her words were clipped. She named things because names anchored her. She added, "Jamie waits at home. He sleeps at 1 in the morning. I have to get to him." The list came out rapid now. Fear had focused her into practical items. Her brother, the bus, the front door key. Fear directed her decisions. Marco barked, "No one moves." "Not until I say." He moved to the window and peered into the street. Then back. "Don't call the police yet." He added under his breath, "Not now." Rosa set a mug of coffee down so hard the counter vibrated. "Maya, tell him nothing." Tell him nothing, her voice cracked on the last word. Luca watched the exchange, and when no one else could make a steady choice, he made one. Leave the scene to us, he said. She saw what she saw. She will come with me for a night. She keeps quiet. We make a story. Marco, the lot, clean it. Rosa, call my driver. Calm the cook. His words were orders, precise and final. There was a hiccup of disbelief in the room. Marco opened his mouth, then shut it. Rosa, we can tea, and stopped. Maya heard the outline of an argument crack in the air like glass, but no other voice rose to take it up. Luca's presence shortened the edges of their resistance. Maya's fear shifted. The first wave was raw and hot. It pushed her to think of escape routes and bus schedules. Now fear bent into another shape. Cautious relief threaded through suspicion. She noticed that Luca's fingers were not clenched. She noticed he avoided looking at the kitchen staff with contempt. She noticed the faint smell of cedar under cigarette smoke. Those details told her two things at once. He could hurt her, and he might choose not to. Rosa, he saw it. Luca, he can't be let out like that, Marco added. There are the rivals on 4th. They'll comb the blocks for witnesses. Luca's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He answered, I'll take responsibility for what she says. She goes with me. No one follows her home. The room held that as a decision. Maya, I want tea lie. I want tea say something that isn't tea true. Her hands folded on the counter until her knuckles went white. The words were both defiance and a plea. Her mouth felt small in the space between the men and the warm lamps. Jamie depends on me. If something happens to him, then we prevent something from happening to him. Luca. He put a gloved hand on the doorframe as if to steady himself, though his posture was steady already. We make a story. We move you. You keep quiet. You go under a name until this cools. Marco will make the calls. Marco looked at Luca with the immediate mix of relief and resentment that comes when an unsought responsibility lands on someone else's shoulders. An external noise interrupted them. Headlights swept across the glass. Through the diner window the street flashed with the white sweep of another car arriving. Maya turned and saw the rival vehicle pull up across the street. Two men stepped from it and scanned the area. The possible perimeter of danger widened in a single, electric second. That arrival forced a new choice to be made faster. Someone hissed, "They'll check the neighborhood." "We done tea of time." Luca's voice came low. He squared his shoulders and moved without theatrics to a back corner where the manager kept a small safe. He instructed quietly, "Give her a blanket. Bring everything that identifies her." "We move now." Rosa obliged and shoved a thick blanket across the counter toward Maya. The cook kept wiping his hands like he could remove the image of the fallen man from his skin. The lieutenants ushered Maya into the back room. The light there was humbler. The sounds of rain were louder than any human voice. A subordinate touched her arm with unnecessary force while searching her pockets. His hand found a folded receipt. He unfolded it, squinted, and said, "There's a name. A Bennett. An address." He slid the paper across to Marco. Marco read aloud, "Jamie Bennett, 14 Alder Street. Apt 3. The words lodged in Maya like another small cold stone. That discovery changed the ledger of risk. Now the men had the exact place to find her brother. The receipt connected the danger to the one person she would kill to protect. Maya's emotion shifted again. Fear curdled into panic for half a breath. Then, like the movement of a hand, she forced a calm into her voice. "He's at home. He sleeps at 1 every morning. He'll be fine for a night if someone checks on him." Please, she Lucas' name, because naming him felt like making a plea to something that could answer. Luca answered with emotion, not a speech. He looked at Marco and said, "Notify someone to watch Apt 3. Discreetly, not our men, local small favors." One of Rosa's contacts. "Keep him safe." Marco made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Fine, I'll call Mendes. He owes me a favor." Rosa grabbed her keys and scribbled notes. The plan tightened, and Maya's chest eased enough to stop shaking. Outside, the rival car idled and the two men scanned the shallow pool of light. One of them tapped a cigarette to his lips and watched the diner through the plate glass. Inside, Luca gave orders. The exchange was efficient. The men cleaned the lot, placed the body in a private van, and seeded a story to anyone who might ask. A mugging gone wrong, two strangers, a debt dispute. Marco and Rosa played their parts with ragged composure. When the headlight sweep slid away, Luca stayed at the doorway and watched the rain run down the glass. He did not look toward Maya. He looked at the street. Tonight she stays with me. Tomorrow we find a safer address. She will not go back to App 3 until I'm sure it's clear. His voice left no room for argument. Marco snapped to it without a second thought. Maya felt an odd, thin gratitude. It lasted a flash, then returned to suspicion. How could a man who made other people vanish choose to keep what the law would take? The choices in front of her were stark. Trust a man who could hide her but whose enemies would not hesitate to use violence, or risk going home and leaving Jamie a target. Fear had pushed her decision to witness to the calculus of action. She chose to go because choosing to protect Jamie meant accepting a stranger's protection. They moved quickly. Two men in plain coats guided Maya to a nondescript car at the curb. Luca stood in the doorway and watched them load her. He did not come with them into the vehicle. Instead, he gave a final instruction to Marco: give her a false name at the safe house. Be sure someone checks on the apartment at 3 a.m. I will tell you who. Marco nodded. Yes, Luca. I will handle it. Marco's words were short, like used coins. During the ride, Maya kept her hands folded over the small silver locket at her throat. The driver did not speak. The rain sharpened on the windows into tiny knives of light. Her phone was off in her pocket. She considered calling Jamie, and then thought of who might answer the line in a building where someone could be watching the stairwell. Instead, she breathed in and out, measuring the movement like a metronome. Luca's driver dropped her at a small rented room before dawn. It had a single bed, a lamp, a table, and a window that looked onto a blank alley. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old perfume. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, the blanket wrapped tight around her. She dialed Jamie with fingers that shook. He answered on the second ring. Jamie, it's me. I had to stay with someone for a night. Don't open the door if anyone knocks. Wait for me to say it's safe. Her voice was small but precise. Jamie's muffled sleep voice told her he understood. She gave him a code, a line they had used as children. He repeated it back, and she felt a brittle relief. At the door, Luca paced the hallway outside the room and listened as she spoke. She could hear his boots shift on the floorboards. He did not come in. He did not intrude. He only listened. After she hung up, he tapped once on the wood and then waited. That single knock became the final, concrete beat of the chapter. Luca placed his palm flat against the door and spoke her name quietly, Maya. She walked to the door and opened it a crack. He stood there in the hallway like a man holding an unpledged threat and an untreed offer at once. I will not let them find him tonight, he said. You will not speak his name outside this place. Keep the locket on. Don't go out alone. I will tell Marco to keep someone near App 3 until I say otherwise. His tone contained no pleading. It contained the logistics of protection. Maya looked at him and nodded. Her hands still trembled enough that the chain of the locket brushed her palm. She made one small choice: to trust a stranger with responsibility for her brother's safety. The hallway light threw a warm rim around Luca's coat. He stepped back and, with a short, clean motion, closed the door and slid the deadbolt. She stood with her back against the wooden door and let the bolt click into place. The sound was final. Outside, rain continued to fall. Inside, Maya folded her hands and counted the small facts she could control. The time Jamie would wake, the name on the receipt, Marco's promise to call Mendes. Fear had driven her to this shelter. Suspicion sat beside her like a patient animal. The chapter ended with the wood between them, and the sound of a car pulling away, and a cost she had not yet measured waiting to be paid. Hands grabbed her arms and shoved her into the back seat before Maya could scream. Fear pressed behind her ribs the way a hand presses a throat. She tasted metal and rain on her tongue. A suited man across from her lowered his eyes to the street and did not speak. Luca Moretti sat at the wheel, the car's engine swallowing the wet city noise. Fear was the shape of her next breath, and it drove her fingers white around the paper napkin she still held. She had been bent over a soggy napkin in the diner when the man fell in the street. She had watched two suited figures move with practiced efficiency, and heard the dull crack of something breaking against bone. She had kept her hand on the napkin because letting go felt like admitting she had seen too much. Now, pressed between leather and glass, she kept her hands folded on her lap, thumb worrying the edge of the napkin until it creased. "Name," said the man who had pushed her, close enough that she smelled his cheap aftershave and the faint trace of nervous sweat. "Maya," her voice came small. "Maya Bennett." Tommy Rizzo spat the name like it tasted of ash. "Where does your brother live?" No, you don't understand." Maya's mouth trembled. "Ellie, he's at home. He's 6. Please." Luca's gloved hand tightened once around the steering wheel. He did not look back. He spoke as if dictating facts to himself. "Stay quiet." They drove with the city sliding by in streaks of amber and neon. Maya's eyes kept finding the rain, slicked blade of the rearview mirror. In it, Luca's profile looked like a carved thing. Square jaw, hair slicked back, the faint scar at the eyebrow. The man had moved with calm at a scene where others had not. Calm that was not comfort. Fear shifted into a different shape when Tommy began rifling through Maya's pockets at a stop under a streetlight. He found her thin silver locket and a faded receipt, and his fingers landed on a small, folded photograph, Ellie asleep on a couch, a plastic dinosaur clutched to his chest. Tommy's mouth twisted. "This ties her," he said. "We get rid of her. This removes risk." Luca's head tilted. The car smelled of leather and something bitter. He cupped the photograph between thumb and finger and did not hand it back. "We don't dispose of evidence recklessly," he said. The sentence held a rule, but his voice was flat, not furious. Tommy's impatience grew visible. He kept tapping the dashboard, jaws working. Maya worked her fingers into the napkin until the paper tore. "Please," she said again. "My brother, he is 6. He waits for my shift to end." Tommy's hand found her wrist and squeezed. It was an action meant to remind her that she offered leverage. Maya tasted copper on her tongue and swallowed air that felt like winter. Her chest tightened and then steadied in a mechanical way. She would not scream if that would make things worse. She folded her hands and forced herself to count the rivets on the seat. The counting anchored her to a small detail and away from the unknown outside. When they stopped at a narrow curb, Luca opened the door and said, "Quick talk." He did not leave the engine. He moved with slow efficiency. Under the amber glow of the streetlight, his measured face looked like a decision. Tommy walked around to the far side and kept his hand close to the holster at his hip. Fear mutates into other instincts. For Maya, it became calculation. She had to keep Illy safe. "Tell me exactly what you saw, Luca." His voice carried no heat. It carried the weight of people who measured consequences. Maya described the scene with quick, clipped sentences. He fell. Someone hit him. 2 men, suits, dragged a bag. I picked up the napkin and then they saw me. "Which way did they go?" Tommy demanded. Maya pointed with a trembling hand toward the pier. Luca did not move. He another 2 precise questions, then closed his eyes for a breath as if cataloging each answer. Tommy kept pacing, muttering that she was danger. Her witness could spark police attention. Tommy the word out loud. "We get her out of the way." Something shifted in the air then. The group's center of gravity moved from a shared procedure to a fracture inside the crew. Luca's jaw tightened. He looked at Tommy, and for the first time since Maya had been shoved into the car, he let a small, private calculation show at his eyes. "Not tonight," he said. Tommy laughed once, short and brittle. "You re-soft, boss." The laugh was an accusation and a test. Luca's hand slid to the glove compartment and closed it. Not soft, deliberate. A minute later, under the thrum of city rain and the muffled hum of the engine, he made a decision that would tilt them all. Instead of handing Maya over, he drove to a temporary apartment used by the organization for discreet stays. The building's entry was a plain door, a neutral buzzer, a stairwell that smelled faintly of bleach. When they arrived, Maya's legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Inside the apartment, under a single lamp, Luca's men checked the windows and the corridor. Their motions were military. They looked for tails. Detective Harris knocked on the building's front door twice, a heavy, official sound, an external event that rippled into the quiet room. Tommy's head snapped toward the door like a struck animal. "Police," he hissed. Luca's set of rules went into motion. He left Tommy to cover the exits and walked to the door himself with a purposeful, slow step. Detective Harris' voice carried down the hall when Luca opened the door a sliver. "We had reports of a disturbance," the detective said. "Any witnesses seen leaving a diner around midnight?" Luca kept his gaze level. "No." The detective's eyes flicked into the corridor and landed for a beat on the three men who stood there. "We'll be canvassing." When the detective left, he did not know Maya had been inside. Tommy slammed his palm against the wall. He wanted to do things by instinct, clean, bury, erase. He could walk back with a badge. "Tommy, we can't take that chance." Maya watched the men argue with a new sense of alarm. Fear had moved into dread. She slid her thumb across the crease in the napkin and thought of Ellie counting stars on the ceiling when she was late. She had promised him pancakes for Saturday morning. The promise felt suddenly both trivial and vital. Tommy advanced toward Maya in the living room. He spoke loud enough that Luca could hear. "We should make this go away." "Now?" Luca's hand closed on the back of a chair. He did not raise his voice. "Not here, why not?" Tommy demanded. "Your rules don't matter if a cop shows up." Luca turned to stare at Tommy, and his face changed in a way Maya had not seen before. The change was not a metaphor. It was an action. His jaw set, the scar at his eyebrow tightening, the muscles in his neck narrowing. He stepped forward and his voice was cold. "You cross a line, you answer to me." Tommy laughed once, then lunged. It was a quick, desperate move meant to settle a score with force rather than words. He reached for Maya with a hand that wanted to silence. In the doorway, the hallway light cut across them. Tommy's movement made the room small and sharp. Luca moved in a single, controlled arc. He met Tommy's wrist, twisted, and the sound was close and raw. A bone finding a new position. Tommy screamed, a short, explosive bark of pain. He stumbled back, clutching his arm. The fight peeled open a new truth in the apartment. Luca would not allow careless violence against someone he decided to protect. "Tommy, Luca." The word was a command. He did not shout. He did not need to. Tommy shoved at Luca with the shoulder he had free. You soft," he spat again, then drew a small blade too quick for Maya to name it before Luca's hand closed over his throat. The exchange was a staccato of attempts and checks. It lasted seconds and left a long echo. Luca did not hesitate. He moved with the brutal economy of someone used to ending threats. A single, decisive strike, one practiced motion, broke Tommy's balance and sent him to the floor. The man lay still, blood darkening the collar of his shirt. Maya stared at Tommy's face and saw the reckless assurance drain from it. The apartment fell into a silence that held sound. Low, wet breathing, a radiator's little clack, the rain on the window. Luca stood over Tommy, watching for any flicker of movement. Maya felt something like gratitude thread through fear. It was not trust. It was a recognition that someone who could have been indifferent had chosen otherwise. Luca crouched and took a strip of fabric from the kitchen drawer. He wrapped Tommy's wound and checked for a pulse. His hands were careful. He did not speak to Maya for a long minute. When he finally did, his tone was blunt and efficient. "You will stay," he said. "You will not go outside. My men will tell you when it is safe." Maya's breath hiccuped. "My brother, Your brother stays with a neighbor for now, Luca answered. We move him if we must. But you obey. Her throat closed on the question of how he could do this for her when he had men who called for her removal. She watched his profile while he spoke to his phone and arranged a short, quiet plan that placed Ellie elsewhere without her hearing every detail. He gave a name to someone who would take Ellie's small form for the night. The decision required trust of a different kind. Trust that these men would not trade one risk for another. When the immediate danger passed, Luca led her to a bedroom where a single mattress sat beneath a lamp. He placed a folded cardigan over her knees, the threadbare thing she recognized as hers when she reached for it. He sat on the edge of the bed and, for the first time, his voice softened by a fraction. You looked like someone who belongs in a quieter life, he said. The sentence could have been a line of cruelty. Instead, it rested like a fact under the room's yellow light. Maya folded her hands on the cardigan and drew in an uneven breath. I work nights, she said. I take care of Ellie. We get by. He considered that and nodded. You stay until Detective Harris loses interest. Can you promise my brother is safe? Her question was a direct one, not a speech. That simplicity made it urgent. Luca did not answer immediately. He reached for a small first aid kit and moved to the lamp to clean a cut above his knuckle, an absent motion, not a confession. When he finished, he sat closer and wrapped Maya's hands with gentle precision, tying a temporary bandage around a shallow cut she had not noticed. His fingers were competent and careful. The action said more than any words might have. It made a small shift inside Maya. Suspicion, then wary relief. She watched him while he worked and found herself noticing details that had nothing to do with what he had done. The scar by his eyebrow was faint in the lamplight. The silver signet ring looked like an ornament he did not often remove. He kept his shoulders held like a man who always expected to be measured. She herself, this was observation, practical notes a woman recorded to navigate a dangerous man. Later, sitting at the kitchen counter while rain skated down the window, Maya made a thin call to her neighbor and listened to a child's voice on the other end. Ellie sounded awake, asking for pancakes, and she said the name of the neighbor Luca had given and hung up before the neighbor could answer. The act was small and felt like both a betrayal and a rescue. They did not speak much that night. When Luca finally left the room, he placed a small glass of water on the nightstand. The gesture was practical. It was also an admission of a different kind, that he would not allow her to suffer a minor need. Maya drank and felt a tiredness that uncurled in her bones. Before dawn, Detective Harris appeared again at the building. This time the knock came at a time when the city had fewer witnesses. Luca answered the door and spoke with the detective again. Maya watched from the doorway, aware that every word might shape the likelihood of her survival. Detective Harris' questions were routine. He names, times, and descriptions. Luca gave a reply that was measured and plausible. When the detective finally left, he touched Luca's shoulder once in a gesture that was not warm but not suspicious either. When morning light eased into the kitchen, it brought a new problem. Tommy's absence from active duty and the whisper of internal unrest. In the apartment's tiny living room, several men gathered, silent, watching Luca. Their faces showed a calculation about leadership and risk. Luca addressed them quietly and then turned to Maya. You will stay with people who know how to keep you unseen, he said. You will tell no one about the night, Maya swallowed. What about Tommy? He will answer for what he did. Luca's words left no room for compassion or for leniency. They simply stated an outcome. Maya pressed her palms flat to the countertop and felt her pulse under her skin. She had come to the apartment a frightened witness. She would leave it with a choice burned into her chest. Accept protection she did not want or return to a life where her brother waited and danger might walk up her street. She looked at Luca and saw that his choice, protecting her even though it cost him control, had shifted something in the small hierarchy around him. Outside, the city began to wake. Inside the apartment, a neighbor arrived with Illy, and the child leapt into Maya's arms with a sticky, earnest hug. The contact was the quiet center of the morning, real, small, human. Maya breathed in his hair and felt an almost involuntary, fierce resolve harden into a practical order. She would keep Ellie safe now. She would obey the rules while folding her life into a temporary shape that kept him alive. Luca watched her lift Ellie, and then turned his attention to a man who had come to speak quietly about threats from the rival group. The conversation in the hallway changed the stakes again. A rival scout had been seen near the diner. The night had become a trigger that forced multiple players to shift positions. The personal moment between Maya and her child ended, and a new order of business took its place. Maya moved to the kitchen window with Ellie on her hip. She looked at Luca across the room and saw him speak to his lieutenant in a low tone. He glanced at her once, and in that look there was a compact of responsibility. She turned back to Ellie, smoothing down his hair. Fear had widened and then narrowed into resolve. Keep him safe, one practical step at a time. At dawn's edge, Maya agreed to temporary protection. She signed no papers. She made no vows. She packed a small bag with a sweater and a photograph of Ellie gripping a plastic dinosaur. The choice was not heroic in speech. It was a list of small acts. Shoe zipped, door locked, names given. Luca issued a condition that sounded like a routine plan. You stay with us until the threat is handled. When they walked out into the light, the world felt sharper, not because it had changed, but because choices had been made in the night. The apartment door shut behind them like the end of a calculation. Maya's life had tilted into a dangerous orbit under Luca's control, and the cost of safety had been named. The chapter closed on a sound. Someone knocking 3 short times on the hallway door below. It was not an ending. It was a concrete event that demanded an answer and kept the next decision waiting, immediate and unavoidable. Enzo shoved Maya through the narrow third floor door and the bolt snapped into place behind them. Fear tightened Maya's lungs. She pressed her palm to the damp patch where the rain from outside had soaked her sleeve. The room smelled of old wood and coffee grounds, and Lucas' men moved with quick, practiced hands that left no loose corners. Within seconds a lamp clicked on. The apartment filled with the low, controlled energy of a place that had been secured before she arrived. Maya's fear drove her first actions. She folded her hands, tucked her chin, and counted syllables in her head so her voice would not tremble when she answered. She had seen a man fall in the street, blood spreading across denim, and she had felt hands yank her into a back seat 2 nights ago. That memory sat like a raw burn under her ribs. Now she heard Enzo's voice cut the room, measured and short. Names. Start with yours. Enzo picked the words like stones and put them on the table. Maya forced air between her teeth. Maya Bennett, she said. Her voice was small but clear. Enzo cut a glance toward Luca in the doorway. Luca's shoulders were a dark edge against the hallway light. He did not move. His eyes tracked Maya the way a hunter watches wind. Maya's whole body registered a new tightening, a move from fear toward resolve, as she thought of Tommy's voice on the phone. The word fear lodged in her again, but now it mixed with a steady current of protectiveness that pushed her to speak. Tommy is my brother. Maya. And when Enzo's eyebrow rose, she added, he's at home. He wasn't at the diner. He was on his homework. The detail was meant to make the danger concrete, not poetic. She could hear the faint scrape of chairs as Enzo pivoted to check the door. Luca walked across the small room without raising his shoulders. He sat on the edge of a threadbare sofa and folded his hands. He looked at Maya the way people examine an unfamiliar object before deciding whether to keep it. Maya watched his hands. She noticed the silver signet ring, the thin watch leather, the faint vertical scar over his eyebrow. She memorized the small facts because facts helped her think. You saw things you shouldn't have, Luca. His voice was low. Even tell me exactly what you saw, Maya. Maya's throat felt raw. She let the memory come back in short sentences the way she had been taught to speak during interviews at school. A man fell. He was bleeding. 2 men in suits, one of them hit him. I bent for a napkin and saw the blood. I looked up. Her words came clipped. Then they pulled me. Enzo's hand landed on the kitchen table, heavy. She watched them. She touched the napkin. She was too close to be clean, Luca. He slid a photo across the laminate. In the photograph, Maya saw herself caught in a grainy snapshot, standing near a dumpster as the suited men moved like shadows. The photo made the room smaller. Maya stared at the picture. Her chest tightened in a different way. Larger, angrier. The photograph changed the equation from possibility to fact. The photograph made Tommy's safety immediate. That's proximity, not proof of collusion. Luca, slow. But if Marco thinks she was with an informant, he will act. He named Marco as if naming a clock set to ring. Maya's mouth wanted to form questions, but the questions were dangerous. Enzo did not wait for consent. He moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside for a sliver of street view. The rain, slick pavement reflected the amber city lights. A courier's boot tapped on the pavement below. The building felt thin. Maya's phone buzzed. Her fingers shook when she reached for it. Tommy's name was on the screen. She answered. Tommy, she said. Maya. Maya, they were outside. There's a man at the corner. He wants to know where you are. Tommy's voice came through small and sharp. She could hear a plate clatter in the background. The line clipped. He knows where you work. Maya's chest hit a new chord. This was no longer only about what she knew. Tommy's voice made the stakes physical, reachable. Her fear shifted to a steady resolve. She met Luca's eyes. You have to protect him, she said. Don't let Marco find him. Luca's jaw tightened. He turned toward Enzo. Check the stairwell. Marco's men move quick. Lock anyone who needs locking. He looked back at Maya, as if weighing the weight of her words against everything he protected. Enzo snapped orders. He left 2 men by the door and sent another to the landing. The apartment's single lamp threw a warm pool onto an otherwise dark room. Outside, rain ticked at the window. Marco's name hung in the air like a timed fuse. Maya stood. She had to make a decision. Fear mixed into a stubborn, dangerous courage, a sense that keeping the family whole was her only actionable job. She pictured Tommy hunched under the kitchen light doing his homework. She pictured the small, crooked smile he used when he solved a problem. Those images pushed her forward. I can make them think I'm the one who's running something, she said. I can draw them out. I can go alone and make them look away from Tommy. Silence thickened. Luca's hand covered the space between them on the sofa's arm, but he didn't touch her. You want to walk into their hands, Maya. Enzo, I don't want him hurt, Maya. Her voice had the flatness of someone who had practiced the words. Her fear shifted again into stubborn negotiation. She was no longer only afraid. She was someone arranging risk with thin logic. Luca tilted his head. He had not expected her to volunteer. For the first time, Maya saw something in his face she had not seen before. A small, contained surprise like a door that a key had touched without opening. He studied the line of her jaw, the threadbare cardigan, the locket at her throat. If you go out there, Luca, you do exactly what we tell you. You do not speak to anyone except me and Enzo. You do what we rehearse. Tommy stays inside. You go to the quay alone. Marco will test you. If he doubts you, he kills for confusion. I understand. The apartment became a machine of preparation. Enzo handed Maya a plain jacket that smelled faintly of cedar. Luca took off his heavy leather gloves and set them on the table. He touched the silver on his hand once, as if steadying himself. Maya rested her fingers on the jacket's cuff and felt a heat there, an offer of protection she had not invited but needed. They planned the walk. Maya would leave through the back stairwell at midnight, walk the wet block to the dock, and wait by the rusting bollard. She would hold herself silent, arms folded, and accept whatever they brought. The plan was simple and dangerous. Outside, rain loosened into mist. Marco's men were on the street in the way that men who are used to making threats move. Quiet, certain, carrying small instruments of consequence. Enzo checked the door one last time, and then he and Luca watched Maya as if giving permission. Maya descended the stairwell with a single lamp above each landing. Her shoes made soft sounds on concrete. She kept her shoulders back and her hands empty. She felt every step. Fear now sat beside a thin, steady courage that refused to let Tommy be a bargaining chip. At the street, a shadow detached from the doorway across the road. Marco's courier delivered a folded note under the building's entrance gate earlier. Now, the man's silhouette came to the curb and lit a cigarette. He waited. He moved like someone who thought he owned the margin of the night. Maya walked past him with her head down. She kept a slow pace and let the city make room. The man lifted his chin, then looked away. His interest was a quick calculation. She felt its weight and did not flinch. At the corner she turned toward the docks. Rain spattered her hair. It made a line on the tip of her nose. She swallowed. She stopped by the rusting bollard and leaned with her back against cold metal. The quay exhaled salt and old oil. In the distance, crates stood like rectangles against a dim sky. A truck idled. Maya pulled the jacket tighter and breathed out, counting to 5 between breaths to steady her voice. A car light carved the path. Marco's men emerged from shadow and closed the distance with the slow, casual posture of people who expected compliance. One of them, a broad, shouldered man with a shaved head, carried nothing obvious. Another held a phone, watching. Maya kept her hands visible and empty. She felt Lucas' watchful weight through the night in the back of her skull. "You alone?" The man at the front asked. He spat words to test the edges. Maya did not lie. "I'm alone," she said. They moved closer. Marco's lieutenant watched her face for fissures. The man with the phone made a small circle with his finger, asking for patience. Maya's palms prickled. Her heart beat a steady, loud drum against her ribs. Tiny motions, a thumb rubbing against the seam of the jacket, became measures of control. Suddenly a shape detached from the dim between 2 shipping crates. It was Marco Vitel, his coat slung over one shoulder, face set hard. He looked like a man who had not slept well. Marco's eyes swept over Maya, and then snapped to the men with him. "This one. Marco." His voice had a smile under it that didn't reach his eyes. "She is small. She thinks she can trade a life for a favor." Maya's jaw clenched. "She nothing." Her silence tightened the space into an accusation. Marco took a step closer and reached into his coat. The world narrowed into hands and metal. For a second, everything felt arranged to show her how small she was. A car door slammed behind the line of shipping crates. Wheels whispered on gravel. Luca stepped into the light, his coat unbuttoned, a dark column against the trucks. He took 2 steps and then stopped with 3 meters between himself and Marco, Luca. His voice held a warning. "You step wrong. This will be over very fast." Marco laughed like a small animal. "Luca, you're soft tonight. You send a girl out and think I'll bite at the hand." He looked at Maya and then at Luca. "What bargain have you offered me?" Luca's eyes didn't move off Maya. "She's not a bargain. She saw us when she shouldn't have. She is not a player. Deal with that." Enzo was at Luca's elbow, tight and alert. The men who had followed Marco shifted. They closed ranks like a hand folding. For a moment the night held its breath. Marco's lieutenant circled slowly. "If she is innocent, Luca, you can let her go. If she is helpful, you can profit. Otherwise you will make a mess of my city, and I won't forget faces." Luca finished. His tone held a promise and a damning calm. Marco's smile faltered. There was a pause long enough for the sound of water dripping off metal. A gun's metal glint flashed just beyond Marco's shoulder. Enzo moved. He stepped forward and knocked the gun arm aside with the flat of his palm. The man with the weapon cursed. Marco's body pivoted instinctively, and in that motion Luca closed the distance. The confrontation lasted 30 seconds. It was violent in the way people who knew how to harm make things efficient. A shot cracked, a man went down, someone swore, boots hit gravel. Enzo's glove came away with a smear of red. Marco's men scattered toward the dark. Luca held his ground over one fallen man and then looked back at Maya. Maya's legs had turned jelly. She had watched men fall in a diner, seen blood-staining denim. She had been shoved into a car where the engine swallowed sound. She had walked to a quay to put herself between her brother and men who kill. The list of concrete acts in her life read like a ledger. In the car on the return road, she kept her hands folded in her lap. Tommy's voice was steady on the phone. They saw you, Maya. Are you okay? He asked. I am okay, Tommy, Maya answered. Her voice was cracked but calm. We re coming. We re on our way. Sit quiet. Stay inside back in the car, Enzo argued with Luca. We lost a man, Luca. We should have let her go. We should have avoided this. Enzo's words hit like a hammer. Luca's reply was a single line. She drew them out. She saved a nest of people that matter. He did not smile. He did not soften. The argument in the back seat was not about violence alone. It was about the cost of mercy. Maya listened to them fight and felt a strange shift. Fear melting into gratitude and unease. She had wanted to step forward to protect Tommy. The choice had forced someone else to pay a price. Her hands went still on the car seat. She thought of the man on the asphalt in the first chapter, of blood on denim. She had been near that scene. She had been shoved into a glossy car. Those images arrived fully formed and demanded reckoning. At the diner as dawn smeared light across the window, Luca parked under an amber street lamp. He opened the car door and let Maya out. Tommy was waiting on the other side of the glass, his small face ranged in worry and relief when he saw her. He rushed forward and hugged her through the door, clutching the hem of her jacket. A man from Luca's crew stood watch in the corner. Enzo had an armband damp with rain. Maya took Tommy's face in her hands. You okay? She said, and the words meant more than any promise. She looked past Tommy toward Luca. He stood a few paces away, coat pulled tight, a dark silhouette. He placed a folded receipt on the diner table between two empty cups and slid it toward her. Maya unfolded the receipt. There, in shaky ink, was a name she did not expect to see. The address of Tommy's school, the time she left, and Lucas' name written in a small, careful script. The receipt was an odd document. It was practical, flat, and concrete. It also meant a decision had been made. Enzo's eyes searched Luca's face. You let her walk out, he said. Luca looked at Maya. She kept her brother safe. The cost was paid. We'll settle the books later. His tone did not apologize. Maya folded the receipt and tucked it under Tommy's cup. She looked at Luca and spoke plainly. I want to be a thing you hide away. Tommy needs a normal life. If you keep us, we have to be part of your rules, not ornaments. Luca's mouth tightened. You will follow the rules I set for your safety. He named the condition without explanation. His voice was low and final. They argued quietly, in short lines, about what protection meant and what compromise looked like. Enzo made a point about consequences. Tommy questions that made Luca's answer come softer. The negotiation moved in practical terms. Safe houses, changed routes, a hush money transfer that would cover the cost of keeping Tommy off the radar. In the corner of the diner, a waitress wiped down a counter, unaware of the names on folded receipts. The city outside shifted toward morning. Maya's fear in that moment had become a tight string of action. Protect, bargain, accept the help she needed. Her emotional path had shifted twice now, first from raw fear to protective resolve, then from resolve to a reluctant acceptance of dependency. Lucas slid into the booth across from them after Tommy had left with a borrowed jacket and an escort. He set his gloves on the table and leaned forward. You did the right thing for him, he said to Maya. You do not get to act alone again. Maya met him evenly. I want to be hidden. I will do what I must to keep Tommy safe, but I will not be your secret. Enzo scoffed. Secrets keep empires together, Maya. Then fold me into something honest. Maya. The words were small, a refusal without theatrics. Luca studied her face as if weighing her for purchase. Then he reached and placed the receipt where she could take it. "You will have a name and a place on the manifest," he said. "You will not be in the dark." The offer meant safety with boundaries. It meant a life that would never again be small and ordinary. But it also offered the shelter she had asked for that night when rain had soaked denim on the street and a man had died. Maya took the receipt and slid it into the thin silver locket at her throat, feeling the metal warmth. She had traded anonymity for a ledger, for a set of rules that would tether her and Tommy to Luca's world. She felt gratitude and unease folded together like a stiff napkin. They left the diner with the day brightening. Enzo drove them back past empty blocks and warehouses where men still lingered with ambiguous intent. Tommy held Maya's hand and chattered about a math problem as if nothing had happened. Maya answered in short sentences, steady and practical. She kept her tone light for his sake. When they reached the building, Luca waited in the doorway. He did not come inside. He handed Maya a small slip with an address and a time. "Meet me at 9 if Tommy is settled," he said. "We will go over the arrangements." Maya nodded. She could have asked why he stayed outside, why his life could not be the one she walked into freely. Instead, she pocketed the slip and climbed the stairs. At the top landing, she paused and turned. Luca had not moved. He watched the street with his hands in his coat pockets. For a second, his face loosened into something like a question. Then he straightened, and the line of his jaw set again. He was a man who calculated costs and did not show them. Maya closed the door behind her. She slid the receipt out of the locket and laid it on the kitchen table where the morning light hit it. The receipt was a small, concrete thing. Inked numbers, a time, a name. It was also a decision lodged into paper. Tommy sat at the table and began to eat the cold pie Shidi brought home. He hummed a tune under his breath while he ate. Maya watched him and felt a slow exhale, a relief that was threaded with unease. She had chosen to step into danger to keep him safe. Someone had paid for that choice with a life, with injured limbs, with arguments about mercy and pragmatism. She folded the receipt in half and placed it in the pocket of her cardigan. It would stay there, a practical reminder of the night's choices. Outside, the city went on, deliveries, buses, people moving through days that did not contain the same hazards. Inside, the consequences of the night had been resolved in concrete ways. Tommy's safety, a payment plan, a place on Luca's manifest. Maya felt the last shift of emotion as the day warmed. Fear had become action, action had become negotiation, negotiation had settled into a fragile relief and an unease that would not vanish. She set the table for Tommy, poured coffee into a small chipped cup, and left the receipt tucked in her cardigan, where she could touch it when she needed steadiness. At 9 o'clock, she would walk back to the address Luca had given her. She would meet him and hear the terms spoken aloud. That meeting would not be free of consequence. For now, she had done the concrete things. Kept her brother safe, faced men who meant harm, and accepted protection that would alter her life. The chapter closed on an action, not a promise. Maya closed the kitchen drawer, slid the chipped cup into the sink, and turned to Tommy when he called her name. She answered and knelt down to tie his shoe. The world outside the apartment was waking, and inside, a small receipt in her pocket confirmed a choice that would hold them a little steadier, at a cost that would be accounted for later.